Please listen through the headphones. Channel 24 is the main platform, the main channel for audio in English. Channel 22 is Español. 22. Okay, we'll get started. I'll just check everyone ready at the back. Anyone else needs headphones? Excellent. I think we have enough headphones. Good afternoon. Thank you for staying until the end of the day for this event on the topic of how climate councils bridge science and policy to implement NDCs and NAPs. My name's Ben Rhodes, and I head up the Secretariat for the International Climate Councils Network, the ICCN. The network is a network of global, national and subnational climate advisors to government who all have an official mandate to advise government in their jurisdiction. They all kind of ground their advice in the latest science, and we have a range of members from all over the world, from Asia, Pacific, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. We now have 28 members from around the world, and we've recently grown in the last week. We were delighted to welcome the Brazilian Scientific Advisory Chamber, who joined very recently, and also the Vanuatu National Advisory Board as well, along with our first two subnational members, New South Wales Commission from Australia and the Maryland Commission from the USA. So this is a really positive development for the growth of the climate councils around the world. And this event will explore how councils, which are composed of climate scientists, support government design, implement and evaluate science-aligned NDCs and NAPs. Before we start, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the NDC partnership. Obviously, we're being hosted in their lovely pavilion with the lovely colourful flag display. And also, I wanted to thank them for accepting us as an associate member of the NDC partnership. Our mission is to strengthen climate governance through effective climate councils. And we hope through the NDC partnership to really directly respond to government requests and support them put in place the necessary governance to deliver what's needed on the ground. It's often said in social media that content is king. Well, I would argue that process is priceless, and governance is all about effective process to get the right outcome, and we'll be exploring a lot of that today. Before I introduce the panel, we're delighted to have a guest speaker from the Talanoa Institute. We have Natalie Unterstel, founder and president of Institute Talanoa, who will talk about their work and how climate governance is important for NDCs. Thank you. Natalie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here with you today. And for those that don't know me, maybe I need to put my phone on. I'm the president of Talanoa. We are a climate policy think tank, and I'm also a member of the Brazilian presidency's or President Council on Economic and Social Development, which is another sort of council which has incorporated more and more the climate considerations. But what I was asked to share with you today are a few points. The first one, since we are in the NDC Partnership Pavilion, I think it's important to start with NDCs. The good news is that since the start of this COP, we've been a lot of new NDCs being submitted, finally, because we know the deadline was long ago, right? But fortunately, we have now, if I'm not mistaken, 122 NDCs, so much better than a month ago, right? And the latest being the one from Djibouti, and yesterday, from today, and yesterday we saw one from Ukraine. So even Ukraine was able to, share its NDC. And we all know, I don't have to go into it, but we all know that, it's good to see the numbers, right? They are improving. But we know in terms of alignment with 1.5, in terms of ambition, they're still far from what we need. But I think on the positive side, the good thing is that in this cycle of NDCs, what we saw is that most of these NDCs, especially from developing nations, I would say, they became much more detailed, much more comprehensive, much more implementable. So in the case of Brazil, my country, what we saw was that it became encompassing of adaptation. It started to be more like an investment plan, although we're not there yet. So I think in terms of quality, this was a much better cycle, right? And this is where the climate councils and the institutional arrangements, they come in. So we know that decision-making process, when it's participatory, when it's inclusive, it has a better quality too. So it's not only because you have more people in the room, but more diversity as well, and more, in most of the cases, that also means more science into the process, right? So I think this is a reflection as well of this process. And here in Brazil, we are at the moment in this, this process where we want to implement the NDCs, and this is becoming like a very, very complex issue. First, because we are a federation, so like Australia and other countries, we have to go into the local level of governments, right? And municipalities, states, in the case of Brazil, they are much further ahead than the national government, to be very frank. I've worked at the local level, I've worked at the national level, and I know that they were the ones to start the policy making on climate, to adopt the laws, to create agencies. Actually, I was the head of the first public agency on climate in the Amazonas state, here in the Amazon, more than 10 years ago. So, you know, those kind of innovations are out there, but there's still a need for more coordination. So I think this is one of the issues that we have to improve. And the other thing also is that the agenda setting is becoming more and more interesting, I would say, because adaptation is something we need to normalize, not the impacts, and how to really build a governance that is going to be effective for adaptation is very much different from a governance for emissions reductions, right? So we have to juggle with these different responsibilities and different political problems as well. So I think this is becoming really like an ecosystem of institutional arrangements, that the experience we have in Brazil. And if in one hand we have one big national council committee, actually interministerial, that is advancing and now has 3 chambers, one being the one that just joined the International Council. There are ideas of reforms and integration, for instance, of the steering committee of our funds. We have a big national climate change fund, for instance, and creating new authorities. So one authority for carbon market regulation, another one maybe to work on adaptation and resilience. So I think this is more or less where we are at the moment. I hope that resonates with your experience, because I know all of us, we are dealing with the same global climate problem, right? And I think this is something that we would like to see more and more integrated also at the international level in this UNFCCC space, right? It's still seen, governance is still seen as a much domestic issue, but I think more and more we need to connect this and really think about climate governance as part of the international and national accountability. So very glad to be here with you today, and really also keen to engage and to share, to really learn from you, from other countries, on what you are doing, and perhaps that may and will inspire us to advance, to evolve with our governance in Brazil. Thank you very much, and enjoy the panel.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I appreciate it. I should say, actually, as well as our panel today, where we have kind of 2 speakers from climate councils, I can see in the crowd a range of other experts from a range of councils around the world. So we'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers, and very much welcome all members of the audience to ask questions. And if I've missed anything as we go, obviously our members, if you can please give your view from your own country on your advice on NDCs. So I'm delighted to welcome three expert panelists. We have Sandra Cortez, who's the chair of the Chilean Scientific Advisory Committee. We have Wei Lin Chu, who's the general manager of the Australian Climate Change Authority. And we have Amanda McKee, who's director of knowledge and learning at the NDC Partnership. Please join us. Thank you. And I haven't got my glasses on, so I can see you rather than my screen, so let me just zoom in there a bit. But we're going to start with questions from for Sandra and Wei Lin. It's quite a loud noise. I hope that's not too off-putting. I'm not sure we can do much about that. Is it rain? Yeah, okay. Is that it's fine. I'm going to ask the same question to you both, Sandra and Wei Lin, and Sandra first. But can you explain the mandate of your council and the role your council has played in the NDC development process?
I can hear.
That's the right channel.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right. I'll start first while the tech is having an issue for Sandra. I'm Wei Lin Chu from the Australian Climate Change Authority. It's a pleasure to be here in Beleng, and I first want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the people of Beleng, who are the Tupinamba and the Pakazas people. In Australia, it's an important thing that we do to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands that we're meeting on and pay my respects to them. So at the Climate Change Authority in Australia, we provide independent advice to the Australian government on Australian climate policy. We are the advisors to government, and the government does the implementation. So we do the monitoring and the evaluation and the assessment of climate policy, and we provide advice to them every year, and it's up to them to choose how to implement that. So we have a legislative role. There's an Australian Act that gives us power, and the Climate Change Authority provides the government with advice on 4 different areas. So firstly is targets advice. So the Australian government cannot make a decision on our NDCs without the Climate Change Authority providing advice on what that could be. The second thing is that we provide advice on the effectiveness of certain Australian government policies, especially big ones. And the third thing is any other matters that is requested by the Minister for Climate Change or the Parliament in Australia, we provide advice on those things as well. The fourth and final thing that we can do under our legislation is to produce self-initiated research and advice on topics of our choosing. And recently we have done so on the emissions impact if Australia adopted nuclear energy as part of our net zero policies, and also about adaptation and the built environment and how Australia can be more resilient in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Lin. And Sandra, you can hear us now. So again, the same question to you.
Okay, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm part of the Scientific Committee on Climate Change from Chile. In this side, you can see some members of the committee. And we are 11 researchers and 1 technical secretary. And we were selected according to a procedure that is established in a law on climate change that my country set about in 2022. And as part of that procedure, we were elected to be part of the scientific committee with the main goal to provide scientific evidence for all the regulatory national rules. For example, the national plans of adaptation or the national plans of mitigation, and obviously to NDC. Our work is made considering different instruments, and also we have to only provide evidence for the national regulations. And we are a team that work at Honore, and in general we don't have a specific budget for working, but through the technical secretary we could apply some specific funding for example, invite the researcher from all the country to be included in our work. And that is possible with international donations, especially, for example, from NDC partnership. And according to that, we develop and way to work, especially to focus in two specific areas. One is to provide evidence for all the instruments, but also we define to have a broad view about all the scientific made in my country, and for that reason we develop scientific dialogues. We start in Santiago, and this year we visit the main cities, and we have an active call for scientific people, for teachers, for people working on divulgations, on communication, and also we invite, for example, students from middle schools that they are working with a specific project related to climate change. That was a very interesting initiative, because we could identify a lot of research that don't finish in a specific papers, but we produce very important data. And the other way we work, especially during the new NDC, we start developing some specific thematic reports that we bring to the COP30 with specific documents related, for example, the climate and health, or the intersection among climate, biodiversity, and oceans, because we are interested in put on the table the most strong evidence that could show the impact of the climate change produced in my country.
No, thank you, Sandra. And I think it's fantastic the way you've kind of reached out to all parts of society and to university students and beyond around the country. It's a really impressive stakeholder dialogue. We should also mention that we are currently working in partnership with the Chilean Council and launching a Latin America regional lead based in Santiago. And you can find the advert on LinkedIn, and we hope that will help learn from Chile's experience to other countries in Latin America. Amanda, we've heard how the NDC partnership's already working in Chile, but for you, what do you think? What do you look for in an NDC to tell you it's of the highest possible ambition, while still being robust and achievable?
Oh, now it's working. It's good. Okay. Thanks, Ben. And it's a great question and a hard one, because NDCs are nationally determined. But what I can say is we look at this from a few different perspectives. We obviously look at the ambition itself, which is the headline targets. But there's actually a lot that comes behind the ambition as well, behind those numbers. And that's a really critical part to it. And that links to the second criteria that we're looking at, which is the quality. And so the quality behind the numbers that are put together, the analysis that has gone into setting them, the timelines, whether they are achievable, whether they're realistic. A large part of that as well is then how are those targets going to be translated into implementation and investment. And so we're seeing a lot of countries coming forward with some of this actually already integrated either in the NDC document itself or as part of the process to set those targets. So looking at modeling as part of the target setting. We also see submitting costed actions. So actually thinking about what that cost is and is it something that's feasible to implement within the timeline. Detailing the investment needs. Mapping and linking to the sectoral transformations that are needed. So these are some of the elements that we look for around ambition and quality. But the third aspect, and I think this is one where climate councils also play a really important role, and we were chatting earlier, but I'm really interested to hear from the other panelists to learn a bit more about how we can leverage your expertise, but it's the process as well. And so when we do look at an enhanced NDC, the process is a really critical part of that because we know if the right sectors have not been engaged, if the right people have not been engaged from the beginning, it's really difficult to create that buy-in that's going to be needed for the implementation of the target. It's really likely, or that there's a high chance that the targets that are set won't actually be credible or grounded in the sectoral priorities. In some cases, we actually see sectors having more ambitious targets than what's in the NDC. That's a good example. But in other cases, we see sectors being handed an NDC document and asked to implement it. And they say, that's absolutely rubbish. There's no way we could do that. So this process is a really critical element and comes hand in hand with the data, the analysis. So this, I would say, when we're looking at an ambitious NDC, these are all of the criteria that we're looking at.
No, thank you. And I think I know that the process is key from, I guess, a wide range of angles, but two that have kind of come to light already. I think one is in Australia that the fact that the government can't publish the NDC until they've kind of received the advice from the council, is not possible in all countries straight away, but that is obviously a really good procedural point to make sure that follows. And I think for governments, with the ICJ ruling, that actually being able to show you have a process which follows the latest science is really important to save the kind of chance of litigation at a later date. And I know as well the stakeholder consultation part of the process is really important, and I know we have colleagues from South Africa who I hope to bring in later. Okay, that better? Okay, we'll move on, and so we have time for questions at the end. So Wei Lin, the Climate Change Authority recommended the Australian government adopt a 62 to 70% target as a minimum commitment, aim for the top range, prepare for both breakthroughs and setbacks, and not rule out overachievement should greater emissions reductions prove possible. Can you talk us through how you arrived at this recommendation and how you tried to balance ambition with achievability?
Thanks, Ben. So in Australia, it was a 3-year journey that we were on to make this recommendation for the target. We actually adopted a very rigorous 5-part mixed method approach to this, which actually touches on some of the points you mentioned. So firstly, it was informed by the latest climate science. So we looked at the latest IPCC reports, what was local, what was international. That was a really big component and the basis of, how ambitious, and that set sort of the ambition level for our NDC. The second component of the 5-part mixed methods model was to look at the geopolitical landscape, not just within Australia, but also internationally, noting that Australia, is an international country that trades with many other countries, and international politics is also a big influence on what we can do, how much trade, and how fast we can decarbonise as well. So that was the second factor. The third factor was macroeconomic modelling that we did. So we did a lot of modelling across the economy for each of the sectors to work out what different things, under different temperature scenarios and ambition levels, what percentage reductions, what that would cost the economy, what and how fast the emissions would reduce under those scenarios. And the fourth thing we did was balance that with actual real-world sector-based analysis. So talking to industry, understanding what technologies are available, what the uncertainties are, not only from a technological perspective, but also an economic and finance perspective to understand the barriers and the key enablers that are required. And the fifth and final one, which hopefully touches on another criteria, is extensive stakeholder consultation and engagement. So we did 3 rounds of consultation as well as targeted consultation with key groups. It included all sectors of society, from big industry, our local governments, because we are a federal country as well, First Nations groups, community groups, other governments, to make sure that we captured everybody's needs and concerns and challenges as part of that process. So we feel that there was not just a balance of ambition, but also achievability in our recommendation. I've heard some people talk about, targets and NDCs are more about the political ambition more than the economic feasibility of what's possible. But I think for Australia, we try to balance both in our target recommendation, which is partly why we recommended a target range, because we acknowledge the significant uncertainty in the world and in the economy and the technologies that are available to decarbonise, which is why we have the range. But another really important thing for us, being a nationally determined contribution, was it needed to be in Australia's national interest, which it certainly is, given that the costs of inaction, of doing nothing about responding to climate change, is far worse in terms of the disaster costs and the recovery and, having to catch up later on. So that's part of our method of how we decided on 62 to 70%, and noting because of that uncertainty, that it should be taken as the minimum, and that the country should aim for more should the technologies and the uncertainties that we looked at, prove to progress and be addressed faster than we think they could be.
Excellent, thank you. Very thorough process, thank you. And Sandra, we wanted to learn a bit more in detail about your convening dialogues with the scientific community. What were some of the biggest learnings that came out of the process?
I'm not sure if I understand all the questions, because it's not
from
working well.
the dialogue with the scientific community.
Okay.
And what did you learn out of the process?
Okay. That was an amazing activity, because we start in Santiago with the researcher from the capital. But after that, we continue with visiting different places in the north, especially dedicated to the copper mining, or in Punta Arenas, where we try to develop clean energy, or in the central area of the country. And in each place, we could identify different researchers, workers, according to their context. For that reason, that situation is very interesting, because we can't develop a unique NDC on a unique research gaps, considering all the country as only one country. We have different countries in the north, in the south, in the central area, and in each place, the researchers and the students identify different problems. And for that, it was a very interesting opportunity also to know about different ways to research. In several places, the people not only use quantitative methods, they need, for example, use mixed methods, or they could develop or some interest in some specific problems. For example, the wildfires in the center of the country is different to the problems related to the salmoniculture in the south. And in that context, we identify that we need to prepare a specific reports for the researchers or for the stakeholders, considering the context in different places, because they also identify different impacts on health or in the communities. And for us it's not easy, because we, in general, until now, we have different instruments, for example, the adaptation plans, that are made by a specific ministry. But we need to, that plans develop a conversation with other ministry, because we are thinking in how we improve the works, in the policy works, the policy makers, integrating different problems and integrate different approximations. And for that reason, we start with this report that try to combine the situation, for example, in the oceans, related to biodiversity or related to some specific meteorological conditions, because we need to integrate not only the evidence, but also we need to integrate the policies for improve the beneficial effects or the co-benefits, especially, for example, in health. We need to, for example, improve the connection between transport with emissions, because we know that they have benefits on the health of the people. And we try to move the situation in that way, because we have separated instruments, we have separated activities from the ministry, the different ministries, and we are facing complex problems in specific areas of our country.
Thank you, Sandra. We're losing your sound there. I think we're losing everyone's sound, excuse me. I think in health, it's a bit of a lucky dip. Is that one's better? No. This one? There we go. I think on health, so thank you, Sandra, for joining our project steering group for our health project. We are hoping to help devise kind of common methodologies and principles for considering health within the work of councils. So for members, do get in touch with us if you're interested in that. Amanda, we were keen. We know that the NDC partnership works by it's a demand-led network. So you receive requests for support letters directly from ministers within kind of climate change ministries. What are you seeing in terms of the demand for capacity building at the science policy interface, and how do you think this will evolve as we move into the implementation of these third round of NDCs?
So exactly, as you explained, our developing country members can put forward requests for support to the partnership at any time, and we match them with our institutional and associate members. So they bring forward support in response to those country identified priorities. And currently we're supporting just under 110 developing countries globally, and 100% of them have requested some sort of capacity building support. So I don't think that's a surprise. Yes, so 100% of them have requested the support. It's also a core element, though, of what we do through the partnership. And so our model is really based on ensuring that countries are receiving the support that's needed, not just to do the work, but then to carry that work forward. And we've had a really common model that we've adopted where we've actually embedded facilitators and advisors in country governments. So we would embed these upon request from the country. Facilitators either help to coordinate efforts across ministries or between the government and partners, and then embedded advisors bring in technical expertise from the outside. But in both of those instances, a core part of their terms of reference is that they are there working under the guidance of our focal points within the ministries. So they're not an external consultant who's coming in and doing the work. They're taking the guidance from the ministry, but they're also leaving behind lasting capacity. And so that can include things like helping develop or strengthen some of the institutional processes for coordination. It can include training staff as well. It's not a foolproof model because we know that there's high staff turnover, but this has been something we found that's been really effective to give an extra hand in the government to take on some of this work and start to sort of spread those tentacles. When we look at the types of requests, I have to say I don't think there's a lot that's specifically at the science policy interface, and I think this is a big opportunity. A lot of the requests that we receive will be very general in nature when it comes to capacity building, or it will be specific to certain sectors or stakeholders in building their capacity. But in terms of developing the capacity to strengthen the NDC targets, for instance, or really think about some of the implementation practices, I think we're not seeing the level of requests that we would hope to see. And this is also one of the areas where we're really excited to have the ICCN as a new member, because we can think together how we can be leveraging your international network, working with individual climate councils and thinking about what is it that you need that we can help to bring additional support for, or how can we take some of the lessons that we're seeing and encourage other countries to think about similar models to build up that capacity nationally to lead these processes.
Thank you, Amanda. That's very clear. And although not a great deal of requests so far, we absolutely stand ready to work with you and think how can we kind of get science-based kind of requests and support them appropriately. We have. I just want to ask Sandra and Waylin one final question for just a very short response on National Adaptation Plans. So obviously this year is all about NDCs, but we can't forget the importance of National Adaptation Plans. And just really a quick overview of how your councils also advise on this. Is it different to the NDC, the relationship with government? So over to you, Sandra.
We start working about 1 year half ago, and we start with adaptations and mitigations plans, and was not a very good experience because we need to show the difference, for example, in the indicators and how we develop the indicators on how we could follow the indicators in the different plans. And I think it's very important for improving the process, include the scientific committee. We need to open these councils to more people that are making science, for try to put better indicators, realist indicators, and especially clear indicators with clear goals to evaluate the change during the time. And so probably that is not easy, but it's fundamental, it's a critical point for improving our action on climate.
Thank you. And Waylin?
Thank you. So, unfortunately in Australia, our adaptation policy and advice isn't as mature as our climate mitigation, I'm sad to say. And so Australia only released its first risk assessment and National Adaptation Plan this year, right before announcing our 2035 target and NDCs in September. So while the Climate Change Authority in Australia currently doesn't have a formal role to provide advice on the adaptation policy cycle, it hasn't stopped us. And we believe we are well placed to do that. So one thing that we are legislated to do is provide advice annually and recommendations to the government. And in previous reports and advice, we have made recommendations on adaptation policy and the policy landscape. So, for example, some of those things we've included is about how these national adaptation plans and risk assessments need to be legislated, and to not just be a once-off, but to happen every couple of years. So we recommended every 5 years would be a good way to do that. And also, we've recommended that we should be the lead on monitoring and evaluation of adaptation policy in Australia. We are well placed, given we do have a strong science basis and we do have in-house expertise on this, given that it's quite related to the built environment as well, which is one of the sectors that we look at and do analysis on. And, we recommended that we do that to be informed by best practice around the world, for example, from the UK and New Zealand. That's it.
Great. Thank you. We have the UK colleagues, so we'll make sure, Waylin, you have a chance to meet them after. But adaptation will be something as a network we pivot to and kind of think, how do we offer kind of more opportunities to learn from each other in this kind of overlooked space. Okay. Audience, it's over to you. We have 15 minutes for questions. You may ask a question of any of the panel or to all of us. You may also just wish to kind of update, particularly if you're from a climate council, how you've advised on NDC within your country. So yeah, please do raise a hand, and if you just say your name and which organisation you work from and ask your question, that would be fantastic. Over to you. Any questions? Also.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. So thank you. I'm Åsa Persson. I'm chair of the Swedish Climate Policy Council. And I was wondering if the panel and also NDC partnership could comment on the role on doing progress review in actual implementation of the NDCs, how your councils do it, and if you see any best practice, because I think, especially as EU member states, of course, a national council does not play a big role in advising on the EU NDC. We have a specific European level climate council doing that. But we are, of course, advising on how should we implement Sweden's part of the EU-wide targets, but very importantly, doing the progress review. Actually, I would say that's the most important role we have. So it would be interesting to hear how regular is your progress review, what have you learned, what is effective, what works for you. Thanks.
I can start if that's helpful. So in Australia, we have an annual progress report, especially to do that. And although I think one area that we could improve, for example, is how we have a consistent approach to monitoring and evaluation. I think our annual progress reports on climate policy progress, and if it's been effective, in previous years it's sort of taken always a different approach, but one thing I'd like to do for us is to have more of a standardized approach, have lead indicators. We know that emissions are a lag indicator. You implement policy, there's a lead time, and in a few years you see the impacts of that, but to come up with lead indicators to signal, what sort of changes and what sort of things are going to be the key drivers to shift the dial on emissions reduction and adaptation as well. So that's where I'd like to take the Climate Change Authority in the coming year. And it's a bit of a shout out to everybody. If you have good ways of doing this, we'd love to talk to you and collaborate and learn and have internationally consistent approaches if possible. Thanks.
Any Sandra or Amanda?
For Chile, probably we have to work more and improve our information system, especially in the ocean, especially how we capture carbon, how we could quantify the impacts on health, for example, because we don't have enough information especially for communication. And in general, I think we need to give more power to the researchers and especially to show the evidence that we have now. But also it's important to develop capacity for produce better research, and especially better options for communicate at the different levels at the society. It's my opinion.
Thank you. Amanda.
Yeah, so I'm actually, this is a great question, and I'm like hearing these examples because I don't know that we have best practices that we're aware of. And in fact, I think especially among our developing country members, it's an area that they struggle with. And we saw this time around with the NDC. Hopefully you can hear okay, I'm hearing a lot of feedback. But we saw this time around with the NDC, there was a huge delay in starting the NDC process because a lot of countries wanted to take the time and do a stock take of what had happened, and it was almost like starting from scratch. A lot of them didn't have the systems in place to really understand, or the indicators to understand where things had been effective, where they had worked, what they could build off of. And so I think it's an interesting area for us to think about as well. You know, leading up to 2030, what can we be doing through climate councils to help countries to be able to set more ambitious targets in the next round, really building off of what's coming? So I like your question, and maybe we can follow up afterwards.
And I think also as well, I know you queried before the role of councils in biennial transparency reports within the UNFCCC process. And I don't think many or any to have any role in this kind of government-led. And actually that is a bit of a disconnect. You know, we should be kind of thinking about how could we change that and look at ways, even if it's informally, to kind of join up the kind of NDC advice with actually then the kind of the BTR process. Dumisani, I see your hand. Welcome. So Dumisani is the ICCN co-chair, but I will let him introduce himself.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Dumisani Malo from the Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa. Thank you very much for the lessons and the sharing of experiences from the panel. I just wanted to check, I mean, Ben, you touched on it briefly regarding the recent ICJ ruling, and I think one of the panel members also spoke about it from, you know, the sectoral buy-in vis-a-vis, you know, the outputs of the NDCs given to sectors. Generally, from the council or within the network members of the ICCN, how can we improve government, you know, either acknowledgement if it's not happening, or even consideration of the advice, especially from an NDC point of view that comes from climate councils to the various governments, whether, you know, be it scientific or, if you like, you know, broadly societal input into the NDC processes. Thank you.
The one thing that I would say is really impactful is that evidence base. And so the analysis, the data, the messaging can be a really powerful tool for the Ministry of Environment or Climate Change, whoever is responsible for that NDC document, to make the case that they need to make with other ministries. So whether that's Ministry of Finance or the sectoral ministries or health and labor or gender ministries, having that data, having that data we've seen has been really helpful for them. So a tool that they actually come to us and request for. So I would say that was one area that we could potentially lean into more.
I think from the Australian experience, in addition to that, one other thing that I think makes a compelling case for climate action and NDCs is also the economic benefits and why it makes business sense and why it is in a country's interest from a prosperity point of view and a resilience point of view as well, is really critical. I think a lot of times people think climate action is just for the greenies or, progressive left, and it shouldn't be, it's not a thing that should be taken seriously. But I think if you can make the case that it is an economic benefit and it makes business sense and it makes economic sense for a country, I think that's a really important factor as well.
In our Chilean experience, we discussed some days ago, for example, the example related with the electric buses. 10 years ago, we don't have any electric bus in Santiago, in the capital. And slowly, the Ministry of Environment with people from the Ministry of Transport would start with a pilot study to show the difference, to educate the drivers, and the number of the buses working with electricity was increased slowly, and now we have at least in Santiago we have a majority of buses, electric buses. And so the people could see the difference when you use an electric bus and when you use a bus based on diesel. It's more comfortable, it's clean, you can charge your cell phone, you could have air conditioning, and for the people that signal is very, very strong because the people see the difference. It's not easy, it's not quick, but we know that the emissions are reduced, and we see the noise in the street is less, and the people understand that the change is useful for their life.
Thank you, Sadra. It reminds me, actually, I saw Piers, you had a post on LinkedIn this week about your Uber driver in Berlin with his electric car, and I think people see the change and see the difference it makes to their pockets, and we need to invest to get there, but I think we are starting to see that change in a positive way for people's lives. We have time for one more question. Or two. Anna, I think first, and Piers we can squeeze in two.
Sorry. My name is Anna. I'm the CEO of the Icelandic Climate Council. So I'm curious to hear from other member councils how they engage with the broader society in their work, as I find this quite a challenge. So,
thank you. It's not easy questions because in my country we are volunteers. We work ad honorem. We don't have a specific budget, and so it's not easy to amplify our work. It's not easy to cover the media with showing our work, but we try to use the platform from the universities where we are from, and we try to use different options, for example, from the Ministry of Science, but I think we have a lot to learn how we could open our activities and how we could use more public spaces. I don't have the answer, but I identify we have to work on that issue.
Yeah, really good question. In the Australian Climate Change Authority, we recently, 12 months ago, got a new chairman, and who's an ex-politician. And since he's become our chair, we have expanded our public communications function big time. So before we just spoke to government, but now we have a whole big function to do media events, speeches, write articles in the newspaper. We have a team that does our social media as well, to not just reach a government audience, but the broader society. So, anybody on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, we have a social media presence there because we recognize the importance of shaping the discourse in the country and you know, being part of that discourse rather than letting other people shape it. So we think that's a really important thing. I welcome that change personally. I think it's been a very positive change. So yeah, those are some ways that we engage publicly, and whenever we have a legislative review, we are also obliged to do public consultation. That's part of our legislative requirement as well.
Thank you, Aileen. Piers, we have time for one final question.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Piers Forster from the UK Climate Change Committee. I think my question is, so let's say you could go and get one piece of evidence to convince countries to set an ambitious NDC target, which bit of evidence would you choose? Scientists are like evidence, facts.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, all right. That's a really tricky question because it's, you know, there's so many things to balance. I think the science is a really important foundation, but if I had to pick one, I think unfortunately it would have to be the economic business case. But that has to incorporate the science into it because you know, you have to incorporate loss and damage, you have to incorporate disaster risk recovery costs into that business case and the economic model. It's a system approach you have to take, and it's integrated. I don't think you can isolate one value outside. I think science is so critical to inform that. But again, I think unfortunately in our world, the economics speaks loudest. So that's what I would say.
I would echo that, but take a slightly different angle and look at the costs and benefits of it. I think dollar figures are powerful, but we also throw them around a lot. So really showing tangibly what that means, the jobs created, the jobs lost, the health impacts, but putting it in dollar figures, I think, would be the evidence I would push for.
I only want to complement, when we visit different cities along my country, in some cases the children see the difference, for example, in some kind of insects, or they say the difference, for example, in some kind of, when the plants produce the fruits, and they don't have specifically what is the difference on time, but they see the difference. Or after some extreme events, they see the number of people affected. And so obviously it's very important to have the impact on have the numbers, or have the cost in dollars or in pesos. But in some places, in several places, the people see the difference in their local space, in their territories. And makes sense when they speak with us. It makes sense how the territory changed during the last times. It's an qualitative observation. It's an experience. It's an experience.
Hey, thank you. Alex, did you want to come in?
Hello. I apologize. I am Alex. Yeah, I don't know what is going on with the microphone. So I am Alex Hulo, I'm member of the Scientific Committee of the Climate Change. I'm member of the IPCC, the next IPCC report, working in the Working Group 3 on the mitigation. Your question is a very tricky question, because I would like to say that the NDC, the role of the NDC is the commitment of the country for the next decade, okay? So the question for the policymaker is, okay, what kind of policy we need to deploy for the next decade in order to achieve that kind of goals. So, for example, in Chile, we have the structure of the complexity of the NDCs is very different to other countries. We have, for one side, mitigations, depending on the forestry, for example, and for us, for the policymaker, it's a very good response, understand how that kind of commitment for the climate change and have a different kind of trade-off in order to invest in one kind of technology or another one. For example, for us, it's very important Article 6 for the carbon market and so on. But maybe for leaders it could be different because they don't have forestry, they don't have another kind of the landscapes. So that is a very tricky question in thinking into the next NDC report, because for the NDC is trying to show the specific complexity in any countries. My response is, the science need to provide the local evidence in order to reduce the gaps between the global goals and the local goals for the adaptation pathways and mitigation pathways in order to understand the trade-off between both. Because the trade-off is involving that kind of different differential costs and differential outcomes and differential impacts into the society. So your question is a very good question, but it's a very tricky question.
Thank you, Alex. We're out of time, I'm afraid, and I don't want to keep you from finding a big bucket of ice to kind of put your head into, and also want to give your ears a rest from the kind of the feedback, and hopefully the rain stopped at least, so you can get home. Right. It's been a wonderful panel. Thank you, panelists. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone. We'll stay in touch.
Just like